Hi guys, Opulence here, triple XS.
Opulence. You own everything. Everything is yours.
No, I am not Jasmine Masters, but I do have something to say. This is just my little attempt to come upon the interweb and have a placement and a footing to get worldviews and deliver the news north, east, west, and south. Notable and entertaining news. Basically, I'm just here to see what's going on in the world and see if we can have a true discussion about the world we live in today. There have been a lot, and I mean a lot, of hassle and flack that's gone upon the world today. And it's all because we have such different views of each other as the human race. Now, me, myself personally, I'm a biracial, transsexual, lesbian, expat, American made, Hasidic Christian Louis Vuitton from the Congos of France, born at the turn of the century. Just looking for my friends. Now, which century is none of your business because you're not supposed to ask people's age unless there's hanky panky involved, and it's just plain rude. I'm kind of like Visa, everywhere you want to be. What is said here and what I say is not fact nor fiction, just my opinion. But the one thing I hope we can agree on is that we all are people living a human experience. Shout out to Daphne and Dave. I would like to think of this as a social experiment for the blind or identity politics. So, for any hearing impaired viewers, just have a friend sign it out for you until I learn how to do closed captions. I really want to talk about what's going on in the world today and everyone's views because it seems that when one person's views are stifled, everybody's becomes stifled. You know what I mean? There are things in this world that need understanding, but people are too quick to jump to judgment and the thing called cancel culture, I guess, to accept everybody and their worldviews. Now, yes, there are some views that are very negative, but even in negativity, there is some kind of clarity that can be had. Now, I will say no, I don't have any viewers per se as of just yet because this is my very first time and this is really me just doing a whole test run of what's going on. So I don't know what can be said, what can't be said, but I will try to use my cunning linguistics, if I may, to help navigate each and every one of us and show an outlook on everyone's experience. I'd like to start to say maybe I'll try to do this for a full 60 minutes and see if I can get get something going of sorts. But in order to do this, I'm going to get boozed up like a cheap dime store hussy. Yeah, because libations is the elixir to help the truth flow free, whatever your truth may be. You know, we as human beings are very similar, but we see each other as very different. If anything, I'd like to start out with maybe getting people's views and opinions. And if you want, I'll even make a email address for people to write in and you know give me questions, take answers, help explain things from their worldviews. Because what I see is one thing, someone different can see something totally different from what they've experienced. The thing about life experiences is that they are each our own. And even living in the same household with people, your views can be very different. Just that's the great thing that makes us human beings, and the whole self choice thing, you know? So if we can join together and have a civilized conversation about the things that are going on in the world or the things that bother you, wouldn't that make the world a better place? To start, let's see. I'm just going to go over just the news in general. And I'm an avid user of Yahoo and Google. So their news sources are kind of the ones I go to now, besides just regular television news or even the newspaper. Do they even make newspapers anymore? In some places, I'm sure they do. But we all get our information from different places. And the great thing, especially now in 2022, is that we have the capabilities and the ability to share everything. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, it kind of depends upon who you are, where you're coming from, and how things are going down. But, you know, we can all learn something from each other, no matter how old, how young, how rich, how poor, which is basically what all life comes down to. You have the uppers and you have the lowers. Then there's the people in the middle, but they can go either way upon what their own view of what life is for them. Let's start off with a article on Yahoo. Kathy Griffin gets last laugh after CNN boss resigns. Now, this whole thing I just heard of it me myself, and it's a little strange, but it also is a fact that you're not supposed to date people you work with. It kind of puts a damper on things, and it can really confuse business. People get emotions in, and sometimes people can't handle it. So what is one really to do? Now, Jeff Zucker from CNN, he's the big head chief and boss. Now he abruptly resigns because he's dating someone that he's worked 20 years with. But in recent years or days, weeks, months, they found a kindred spirit in each other and decided to make it official. And he gave her a ring. And now they're in love, maybe. Or they could just be doing hanky panky, But who are we to say that they can or cannot? It all comes down to a power struggle of who says we can do what in what capacity. And that's the thing about society today, even in race, even in gender, even ethnicity. Because as I hope we all know, race and ethnicity, they are what do they call it? Two sides of the same coin, but they're very different things. And just for me, in my understanding of it, race is something that is color coded. So you have white, black, red, yellow, and brown. Boom. Baselines of the color. That's a whole color chart there for the human race. But in that color chart, you have different people from different regions who may look similar in some ways, but then there's just one striking difference in them that people feel makes them either superior or lesser than. So who's really to say what's what? We are making rules up as we go along. And the humans have been around for quite a long time, yet we still haven't been able to achieve the goal of ultimate peace. And just here in the US, they think and say things that are very divisive. And who's the one that's creating the division? And who is the ones that started the division? You have to trace everything back to a singular node because everything had to start somewhere with someone. You know, in religion, they say we started from Adam and Eve, and they were created out of mud, and God breathed life into them, and boom, now we have the human race. But if we're going by that notion, first of all, the tales. So there are so many different tales of how we as a people were started, created, and then divided. In the Judaic sense, in some sorts, there was this lady called Lilith, and she was supposed to be Adam's first wife, right? And she was made from the same thing that he was, out of the mud. Now, with the whole Eve thing, she was created from Adam's rib. So that's a little weird in itself. So we humans have been, matter of fact, mammals in general, or basically every living thing, we come we come from women. Mhm. And whatever your definition is of women nowadays, whether it is the old school, women's have vaginas and boys have peters, you know, that kind of thing. Or it could be anyone can be anything as long as you identify as such. Me, myself, I go for the mammal chromosome genome. So that's the XX for female and the XY for male. And I would hope to think that no one can really debate the subject of chromosome. And they say gender is fluid. So anybody can, a woman can identify as a male, I take it, or something of the sorts, and a male can identify as a female of something of the sorts. But it doesn't have to be the marker that's on your birth certificate. Now, I come from a very old school generation. I was born at the turn of the century, and it wasn't the last four. So I've been here for a little while, and the understanding that I've had to come from everything that I've seen, people are just weird, dude, weird for no reason. And a lot of the times we're finding hate in places that there's no need for it to be. Like, why and why for? Just because. There's always some kind of power struggle. whether it's men against women, n- non people of color, which I call non pox, okay, versus people of color. I like to say people of color because it gives a broad definition of just, little twinge and tint of color to the skin. And something that is going on here nowadays is something of the sort in Joe Rogan's case, is that his name? I'm not sure. But he said something about, American black people can't really be called black because they're not black people from Africa who, barely wear any clothes or something of the sort along those lines. And okay, okay, all right, that's fine. And that's his view, you know. But can it also be said that white people aren't particularly white and more of a pinkish tone? Because snow is white, cotton is white, clouds, for the most part, are visibly seen as white, but they got a little twinge of gray here and there. And depending upon the weather conditions, it can be cloudy with, a chance of meatballs. But who knows? Where all of this comes from is from one sector projecting their beliefs, their fears, their I don't know to call it hopes and dreams upon others. Because I had a question really, like what was America called before Christopher Columbus, quote unquote discovered? And that's a whole issue in itself. But the Native Americans had their own verbiage for what land is. Now, what it was exactly, I'm not sure. And if there are any Native Americans out there, please let me know, like, what your history and your ancestors, some of the knowledge has been lost over time due to, calamities, war, disease, or people just not speaking, because for some of us younger generations, the older generations failed to tell us things that can probably be considered very important and probably clear up a lot of the confusion that modern generations have. In a lot of families, you know, older people don't like to talk about the past because, oh, well, why bring up the past? Because your past is your present, and your present can lead to a future. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do how many people know who even their great grandmother is? Like, well, now in these modern great times, your grandmother is probably 37 years old, you know. But does she know her history and where they came from and who's who and what's what of what makes you today? Because each and every one of us are a representation of our parents, our grandparents, great grandparents, and all of those that come before, you know. Like where do you draw the line in your knowledge of your heritage and who you are as a person, you know? I'd like to know. And these things help us out navigating our everyday lives. Now, my problem with today is technology, as great of a tool it is, it's kind of used for some very crummy things. And we now are a generation that has all kind of knowledge directly, like literally, at our fingertips, like tippity tap 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 tap, and you can find out a lot of things very easily. It's just whether you want to believe them or not, what what you put into it, what you believe from what you were raised from, to finding out things that aren't really, that that aren't true, that aren't true at all. So, like, let's say, take for instance the latest. Okay, so the latest big thing that's going on here right now. Um, Whoopi Goldberg has been suspended from The View for her own personal knowledge, belief, understanding of what race is. And she says, as a black woman, she understands race, I guess, a completely different way. And especially as an American black woman or African American, because when we say black, it just denotes a darker skin tone, melanated skin. You know, there are there are things that are called oh, okay. So to put it, I guess, in simple terms, in the Latin community, for the most part, we view the Latin community as a fair to tan skin kind of people. But then you have Afro Latinos. So are Afro Latinos different from, I guess, quote unquote, regular Latinos? Or white passing? Like white passing, that's an actual thing, and it comes in all nations. And it's crazy to think about, you know. But either or, the connotation of race and ethnicity and a black Latin versus a white Latin, and then you have the in between, which is what we recognize as a Latino generation. They speak Spanish fluently and beautifully, and their skin is a nice Copacabana sandy brown tan, and that is them in their category. And then for black people, you have white passing Afro Americans, but that's kind of due to interracial relations. And that whole thing in itself is still a mystery to a lot of people. Just because someone is of a lighter skin tone does not decrease their ethnicity in, I guess, how they identify and who they are. The one people, non-pox, are the ones that can basically say that there is not a connotation of a black white person, because that's just interracial. But that is by their own definition. And a lot of our definitions that we have of society today comes from one certain sect of people and what they think that society is and how they view society. It brings up the notion of assimilation. And this is something that I hear quite a lot. You know, why can't why can't people from other countries that come here just assimilate into what the American values and views are? My question is, who, as an American, whose values? We just had a politician who said Black Americans vote different than Americans. how are Black Americans a different category from Americans? Aren't If we were born here in America, I don't care what race, creed, or kind you are, you're an American. That goes, that goes to a subject of something Raven Simone said. And I know I'm just raving and going off at the mouth and bumping my gums and gnashing my teeth. But she said, no, I'm not black. I'm an American. And people took that at face value and they got very irate by that statement, and mm, understandably, ununderstandably, we all took what she said and we internalized it for ourselves. And that's no matter who you are. Yes, we are American. Everyone born here in the great continent of North America is an American. We are a melting pot, or at least that was the story that was told. But what does it mean to be a melting pot? It means to take everything and mix it up together, and boom, you have an American. But and yet still, we are so divided in what one can do and what one can't do, and culture vultures and cultural appropriation. Is there really a such thing as cultural appropriation as Americans? I mean, for everyone that is born on the US soil, is there and can there be cultural appropriation? Because don't we all, even though we are all individuals, don't we all basically share the same culture? And what is the American culture? For different people, it means different things. For Latino people that are born here, their cultural existence and experience is different from an Asian person's, or a black person's, or a white person's. And as I think we would all know, there is a certain sector of people who I guess make the rules. Like who really makes the rules? Well, we know who basically made the laws of the land, of this land, of the new land, and what they feel is right and what they feel is wrong. But a lot of what they feel is right is completely doing wrong and harm to others. And that's just historical fact. That's not something that can really be argued or negated. Like no, the the people who run the world, who are they? What is their ethnic background besides being American? Because we have I'm German, I'm Italian, I'm this, I'm that, I'm English, I'm British, I'm Scottish, I'm Haitian, I'm Jamaican, I'm West Indies, I'm Geechee, I am I'm Japanese, I'm Chinese, I'm Koreanese, and I say that as a joke, so please don't get irate. But we have sectored ourselves off and say, well, we should be unified and we should have unity. And where it's this person that's causing the division, and it's that person division has been here from from the beginning, from the very beginning, when the colonials gave Native Americans blankets. And we all know how that turned out. Wasn't very awesome. Then we have celebrations like Thanksgiving. As an American, I love Thanksgiving. It's when I can and eat a lot, and you're not supposed to feel bad about it. But it's basically just a celebration for me as an American. It's just another day that has been drilled and instilled within me as an American citizen that this day is a good thing and is to be celebrated. But for Native Americans, not so much. Indigenous people, that was not the best of times for them. And from the way that the story is told, when they got here, the Indians wanted to be friends and they're like, hey guys, I'm sorry, I don't mean to say Indians, but Native Americans. But even in that, and still, even just those wordings there. Why were they called Indians? Because some guy from Spain was looking for India and he got blew off track and just happened to end up here and said, hey, you guys are Indians. No, I'm Cherokee, I'm Navajo, I'm Stono. They're their own indigenous people of this land. Now, as current residents of this land, I'd like to think we are all, yes, like I was born here. My parents were born here. My grandparents were born here. My great great grandparents were born here. And it comes down to, well, how do you define a generation? Because there are still new new Americans that are being made that come from different countries other than just America. That once again, that goes back on to making this whole thing a melting pot of a society. I would like to know, what are your views and how do you think of society as a whole? Because with us being the great different individuals that we are, aren't we all going through something? Aren't we all living a life and trying to make the best of it? No, I don't think no one wants to be miserable. I mean, there are certain sectors of people who get off on being miserable, but aren't we all just trying to basically make it here and make the quote unquote American dream happen? How as people do we make this happen? And what do you consider to be the American dream? The American dream can be different for different people. Brand new citizenized, or I forget the wording I'm looking for right now, but the people who take the Pledge of Allegiance and they take a test, like you have to take a test to be an American. Like there's a whole thing. Oh, okay. So by someone coming from Pakistan getting, is it nationalized? I don't know. Help me out with the word, people. Maybe you know, maybe you don't. But for them, does does one becoming a U.S. citizen not make them Pakistani anymore? Does it not make them Nigerian anymore? Does that not make them Taiwanese anymore? Heck, Does it not make them Canadian anymore? I it's crazy to think that, Canadian people are so much different than American people, but it's a whole thing. They have I would think a French background, I do believe, because that's one of the major languages of Canada is French, correct? If I'm correct, um, but that's how their whole thing started. And here in America, our our America as we know it today started from colonial, or as some may call them, colonizers, came, put their rule down, say they conquered, took over, whatever, and now that's just what it is. We can go into deeper subjects later about those kind of things, but there's an article here from BuzzFeed about Black people who were adopted by white families, and they are sharing their experience and advice. And it may be tough for some parents to read, but some it's very necessary. Now, they say they asked members of the BuzzFeed community to share their experience and advice on being adopted by a non-POC family. Okay. And a lot of them are very devastating. I read over this before I came to put it here, and a lot of their experiences, yeah, that's kind of sucky. One says the fears that Black people have, white family members don't understand, and I had a family member tell me once that the fear I had of getting killed because of my skin color was an irrational fear, even after seeing the disparities in how people are treated. It can be a bit challenging, as there comes a point where you start to struggle with identity issues. You don't fit in with the family sometimes because of the difference in interest, music, and culture. And it's hard to fit in the Black community because you might not feel Black enough. And then the white family, you aren't white enough. But in the case of adoption, you very much are not white. No. So what makes a white person white besides their skin tone? What makes a Black person Black besides their skin tone? It's all about the experience that they've had. Another one, and a lot of these are anonymous. I want to say there were only like 4 people who put their name out there, like KROXDZ. Please learn how to care for our hair types. My adoptive mother couldn't handle it, so she constantly had to cut it off. That is awful. Has a non-talk ever had to cut off their child's blonde hair because it was just so unmanageable? I don't know. Could be. I've never had my hair cut off. And it's always been manageable, and my mother has been able to care for my hair until I was able to care for myself. And that's the thing right there. Black actresses are having a problem in Hollywood because they are giving stylists that can't do their hair. But for beauticians in general, there is a certain texture type of hair that everybody must know how to do and everybody can work on. And it's basically the straight variety. And no, that's not just for white people or non-pox, excuse me. It goes for some Indians, and I mean Indians from India. And it goes for some indigenous Native Americans. And it goes for some Asians. And it goes for some Latins, you know. And it goes from some Jewish people, you know. And that's a whole thing. And that's the big thing that's going on today. The whole, well, what is Jewish? Is it a race? Is it a religion? What is it? And it seems that those kind of simple conversations can't be had because somebody gets in one big hullabaloo and they have their own agendas that they have, and they have their own issues that they have to face. But that's just them as an individual and person. But when you have a platform, you're able to express those a lot easier than someone that doesn't. But I would like to think that with social media, we all have a platform. Everyone, from the bubba from down south to the Inuit Eskimo up in the North Pole with a phone and Wi-Fi access. But that's just my opinion on what it is. Oh, but go on to these other ones. My experience was absolutely terrible. I dealt with microaggressions from my family constantly, and sometimes just blatant racism. My body was always talked about negatively, and my hair as well. It caused me to have major body dysmorphia, which has been extremely difficult for me to unlearn. I was labeled an angry black girl and was told multiple times to stop trying to dress like a rapper's girlfriend anytime I wore hoops and clothes I thought were cute and that I looked good in. Hmm. This is this person's experience. And you can't say, oh, well, they're just being irrational about and they don't know what they're talking about and they're just taking things out of context. But when when the mirror's flipped around on the other person and they feel that they're being judged and they're being called a racist or a bigot or a Karen, ooh, I love that word. It becomes a big issue and it becomes something that they feel that they're being judged against. Because I hear a lot. I hear a lot. Well, I'm white, but I didn't do anything to anybody. Okay. No one really said you did unless you are subconsciously projecting the bad things that you have done, just no one found out kind of deal. I would like to think when speaking about individual races, ethnicities, backgrounds, whatever may have you, we aren't grouping everyone in that certain spectrum into one big conglomerate of, well, yep, that's just what you are. Because honestly, that was something that was done by non-pox. They grouped each individual into their own thing and they said this is what you are, not what the individual is. When people say I don't see color, okay, are you colorblind? Can you not see reds and greens? Like where does you like that's a visual problem right there, and you should probably go see an optometrist about that. That would probably be very helpful. We all see color unless we are technically literally colorblind. what you may not see is what and who the individual is. Because I have friends of all ethnicities, all backgrounds, rich, poor, and kind of everything in between. Because that's where the mixes of the races comes in at. And for biracial people, they say, "Oh, well, I don't feel black enough and I don't feel white enough." Well, what is it to feel black? What is it to feel white? Is and for some people, being black is snapping your fingers, rolling your neck, and having a very boisterous and loud attitude. And but that's not all black people. That's not all people in general. There are people from different backgrounds who do extreme. It's an extreme, you know. Everything is going from one extreme to another, and you're either on one end of the spectrum or you're on the complete opposite. So either you're quiet and, very keep your cards close to your chest, or you're very outspoken and you get the zhuzh, the razzle dazzle, the 23 skidoo, you know, party girls. You're party in the body, a blast in the glass. I like to think of myself as a blast in a glass, full of fun, extroverts and introverts. But I would like to know from everyone's worldly views of what's it like to be a person. Now, if like I don't know how this YouTube thing exactly works, and I'm just playing with it, but if you can give me comments, um hit a like and subscribe, because that would help out a lot too. Um it would help out a great deal. And maybe your experience can help someone else from a different background learn more about the world and who we are in it. Once again, this is Opulence, Triple XS. No, I am not Jasmine Masters, but I did have something to say. Let me know what you think. Bye, guys.